Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad you're here with us tonight for what I know will be a meaningful, inspiring, and let's be honest, probably a little bit heartwarming and hilarious conversation. Tonight's panel is called Pesach with Neighbors, Building Community Through Open-Hearted Hospitality. And it's all about how opening our homes and our hearts during the Seder of Pesach can transform not only a holiday, but lives and communities. Before we jump in, I want to take a moment to thank and introduce the incredible organization hosting tonight's event, Uri LeTzedek. Uri LeTzedek was founded by Rabbi Shmuel Yanklowitz with the guidance and inspiration of Rabbi Avi Weiss and Ruth Messenger, who helped shape his vision as a student at Yeshivat Chovevei Torah in New York. Uri LeTzedek is the first and only Orthodox Jewish social justice organization rooted in Torah values. Their work uplifts vulnerable populations through powerful and practical programs, such as Tav HaYosher, which advocates for ethical labor practices in kosher restaurants, Kavod HaBriot, a mobile shower unit that provides dignity and hygiene to unhoused individuals and asylum seekers, and Shemaim, Jewish Animal Advocacy, an initiative that promotes compassion for animals through education, community, and ethical Jewish living. We also invite you, yes, you, to become Tav HaYosher compliance officer or join our regular Zoom classes to dive deeper into Jewish justice and Torah-rooted activism. More on how to stay connected at the end of this panel. Now, let me introduce our incredible speakers, two people who truly live the values of radical hospitality. Rabbi Hart Levine is a community builder at Hart, no pun intended. He started Heart to Heart initiative in college, has worked with Orthodox Union, Mizrahi organization, and Open Door Media, where he is the vice president of content strategy and is simultaneously the spiritual leader of the Base community, a grassroots Jewish community centered around connection, openness, and a deep Torah in Washington Heights neighborhood in New York City. He, together with his family, is known for inviting people over for Shabbat and for making surprisingly moving data visualizations. Rabbanit Tanya Farber also worked for a decade with adults with development and disabilities and remains committed to accessibility and inclusion in religious communities. Rabbanit Tanya studied Torah in Haredi seminaries, Bati Midrash, study halls such as Drisha and Hadar, and completed social justice internships. Her teaching fuses Torah and spiritual relevance with the ethical call to action and service. She is together with Rabbi Hart, the spiritual leader of the Base, which she describes as a spiritual home rooted in intentional Judaism, meaning-making, and inclusivity. So thank you, both of you, for being with us today. Hart, let's start with your story. Can you tell us how the Base came into being? What was the spark? What need were you responding to when you founded it?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having us on. It's really an honor to be here. It was probably speaking to Rav Shmuley once, and I'm like, how do you do all these things? And he's like, I don't know, you got to make time. So back in maybe early 2010s, like 2012, I was living in the Heights. So people who don't know Washington Heights, there's a lot of shuls here, a lot of Jews here. But one of the things that myself and some friends and my wife, we started to notice was a lot of shuls, but not so much community. And it actually was spurred by, I think there was an article in the New Yorker, which said that New York is the loneliest city. And it's so surprising. So many people, so many tall buildings, so many beautiful, magnificent communities, infrastructure, but yet it's such a lonely place. So we said we wanted to make a community, a home that felt more like that and less like a big institution. So we started a little grassroots gathering, and then we outgrew our apartments, and then we found old shuls that we sort of brought new life into. So that's how it started. We also worked with the OU and with the National Council of Young Israel to really reimagine how young Jews can shape their lives and their communities. So that's how it started. Definitely filling a need of people who were searching for community and searching for meaning, searching for connection. Um, and even though we've gone through different iterations, I think that's still true today.
Wonderful. Uh, and how did that hospitality, particularly around Shabbat and holidays like Pesach, play a role in that origin story?
Sure. So actually, I'll actually say that the first thing we did in launching our community was actually running a Seder. It was before we had done anything, and we were sort of just like dreaming and visioning and talking and complaining, as Jews tend to do. And we said, you know what, let's do something. So we decided we were going to host a Seder. When I was in college a few years previously, I'd organized student-run Seders on campus. And so I'm like, what if we organize a Seder here in Washington Heights? And we're going to find people and we're going to bring them in. And maybe I'll share a little later, but it was so successful that we're like, wow, let's start a whole community based around this. So in some sense, that original Seder we hosted back in 2014 was really the origin story and the launching pad for what's become a community that's, spanned over a decade and reached thousands of people.
Wow, that's impressive. And if I understand right, 2025 is 10th year anniversary, right?
Yeah, so we skipped a year during COVID. So this is our 10th year this was our 10th year of doing Seders. Um, yeah, this just a month ago.
Wow. We often hear this term of radical hospitality. What does that actually mean to you, to both of you? Yeah, especially in the context of a Seder, Pesach. Tanya?
Yes, and thank you so much for having us to Urilat Sadak and to this community here. There are many people who host, and it's really a very open thing to let people in your home. Even if your home is immaculate and perfect, there's a vulnerability. But I think what the base does that's so unusual, and Marco, you had mentioned that I worked in a group home for people with developmental disabilities, and I feel like that prepared me for the point of actually this isn't about a community where everyone has to be the same and have either, everybody went to the same college or the same camps or have the same political leanings or the same religious practice. The base in Hebrew, bayit, means home, and it really is an inclusive place for anybody who comes. And working with the population of people with developmental disabilities, where often, unfortunately, they're made to feel less included. Often will sit at different tables being ignored where other people have intellectual or other kinds of conversation. And that sort of openness of inclusivity where everybody, regardless of their intellectual capacity, their experience, their religious practice, everybody is equally a part of the community and everybody is important. And even though Hart and I serve as the co-spiritual leaders, Hart used the word grassroots, it really has that egalitarian, not in a religious sense, but in a social sense where everybody belongs and everybody's voice is important.
That's beautiful.
And
Since we are speaking about how important every single individual is, can you share, Tanya, a personal story or memory, maybe that moved you or challenged you about a Seder you happened to host or attended that shift your understanding of what a Seder could be?
So I will share two stories. The first was thank God there are 2 nights of Passover in Gullus in the diaspora outside of Israel, which just means there's another opportunity for a second Passover Seder. So the first nights, Hart and I lead Sudarim in 2 separate locations, but for the second Seder, we come together actually in Hart and Yael's home. And I was sitting next to a young lady who was very, very engrossed in what was happening and was very curious when we were going to serve the Paschal lamb sacrifice. And I, I walked in with all my assumptions. I think I'm so open-minded and inclusive. And she was really excited about partaking of the sacrifice. And then I mentioned that, that is only in times of the temple. But she didn't seem to know that there was no longer a temple in existence. And, you know, it was it was such an exciting moment to realize that so much of the knowledge and the background that we all come with different backgrounds, that this was so new and this was so exciting. And since that Seder, which I think was 2 years ago, I imagine to myself, and I speak to everybody, what if it's possible, right? That the Paschal sacrifice is going to be offered, and I try to limit my assumptions in terms of what people know and what they're coming in with. I have a second story, but I'd be eager to hear if Hart has a story as well. Oh, should I share my second story? Okay, my second story was this year. So maybe a little bit later, we'll talk about the Haggadah and how this Haggadah doesn't presume all sorts of Hebrew literacy or a strong Jewish background. It's equally accessible and engaging to Jews really of all backgrounds, as we call it, Passover pros or first timers. And that means that we need to balance tradition with accessibility. And let's face it, people are hungry and it's a long night. And so we want to get to the food. And then after, of course, we have the ceremonial recitation of Hallel, of praises. And it's a lot of Hebrew and it's a lot of singing. And there's this inclination to kind of just like rush through it and truncate it and minimize it so that everybody, whether they read Hebrew or not, is able to participate. And what we did is what I've learned this year, which I hope will carry us forward, is that people love authenticity. And through tunes and through excitement and through singing and through the beat and through dancing, it actually doesn't matter whether you read the Hebrew text or don't read the Hebrew text, that we can create an ecstatic, uplifting experience of a full recitation of Hallel, where some of the people who said, "Oh, I had a spiritual high," some people were were moved to tears. We're not people who have familiarity with the liturgy, and the power of our tradition doesn't need to be watered down in order to be accessible. That sometimes in its fullness, it can really reach and embrace everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. I was wondering, what are some of the barriers or hesitations people often express when it comes to opening their homes or even coming to someone else's home? And how do you coach them, advise them through that fear and discomfort? Maybe Hart?
I can speak to that a little bit. So we have two roles. One role we call the host, and then the other role is everyone else. And the host, it's not literally just hosting it in your home. That's something we do. But also the host, I mean, for some people, that's the first barrier. They say, I can't fit people in my home. So we say part of being a host is not just sort of in your physical space, but also the role that you play. And so we try and encourage people, not just people who are rabbis or rabbinical students, but actually people who want to make this experience meaningful for someone else. Anyone who's part of our community on a regular basis and has the skills and the familiarity and the social sort of confidence to welcome people in, we say you can be part of our host team. So we try and actually make it a very inclusive host team, because actually we actually know that we need every person there. Every person really brings so much to the environment. So that's one barrier. People are sort of worried, oh, I'm not a rabbi, I'm not a rabbinical student. The answer is no, you can actually bring so much, especially because a lot of the people coming are so hungry for, as Tanya said, for meaning, for connection. So people can really add so much. In terms of people joining, so there's a lot of barriers, why someone doesn't come. One of the things we do is we set up a table on the street corner, this is the whole another thing. We set up a table on the street corner for a couple of weeks before Passover, and we stand there. Me, my kids, sometimes Rabbi Tanya, other people, and we table, which means we stand there, we smile at people, and we offer them maybe macaroons, maybe a little shot glass of grape juice, and we invite people to join us for Seder. And sometimes there's a lot of skepticism of, in New York City, when someone stops you on the street to give you something, there's always a lot of New Yorkers just like walk by, they pretend they didn't hear you. And there's actually a whole skill in sort of how do you get people to stop and listen and to engage. And when we talk to them, sometimes they're like, "Oh, Seder, I'm not Orthodox. I'm not." Or some people say, "I'm not Jewish, just my partner is," or "I'm not Jewish, just my mom is," or "I've never been to Seder in 20 years." And we say, "Then this is the Seder for you." And sometimes people just have these preconceived notions of who Judaism is for, who Passover Seders are for, and so try and like disarm them. First of all, just being on the street, so that's like a very much sort of we're on the same level. I'm not preaching to you from the lectern, but I'm actually on a street corner, sort of next to a table with you, and sort of helping share with them that this also could be for them. And I think that's actually one of the reasons why we do it in our homes instead of in our synagogue. We have a beautiful synagogue space, beautiful cozy synagogue space. And actually, one year we did do the Seder there because just like capacity, we had too many people. But actually, we prefer to do it in people's homes. So then it's not saying come to our synagogue social hall for the mass communal Seder, but actually you're invited to my dining room to sit around the table with me and my family and my friends, or my friends and their friends, and it's actually a very intimate gathering. So there is some there could be a barrier, wow, coming into a stranger's home. But I think actually for people who are looking, the ability to, I mean, this doesn't happen so much to a stranger to welcome you into their dining room table. Um, and for some people, especially in New York City, this big, ginormous, and also lonely city, actually people to be invited into someone's home is such a powerful invitation. So it could be a barrier, but I think for people who are looking, it's such an enticing opportunity that's how people have come to us because they're like, wow, I can't imagine someone would invite me into their home.
That must be both surprising to them and also encouraging in some way, but bringing this new idea of intimate gathering. And if I may say so, since Hart and I are friends for a couple of years now, when you come, if you have a chance to be invited for Shabbat dinner at Hart's apartment in Washington Heights, when you enter through the corridor, when you walk through the corridor, you can see the pictures of him and his two boys, Halal and Ben-Ami, twins, throughout the years, standing on the street and presenting, introducing the Pesach Seder with neighbors to the neighbors. And you see them every year growing up, and now they're 10 years old or something like that, right?
Yeah, almost.
Almost. Yeah. Okay. So what's for the people who are listening us now live and those who will listen to the recording, what is one small shift someone can make to create a more welcoming and inclusive Seder or more intimate gathering, as you said, next year, even if they don't have a big table or fancy setup?
Well, just to pick up where Hart left off, I will also just mention that a lot of the people who've come wouldn't be at a Seder. It's not like, oh, we'll either go to the base or we'll go somewhere else. If they weren't at the base, they might not have a Passover Seder at all. And I think that's a good place to start, is to think who's not getting invited, or how can I reach people who would love to connect to Jewish ritual, to community, but aren't connected. And so that is step number one. And sometimes it's those people who bring the most because they cherish it and they value it They don't, gather for Shabbat each week, although some people come from Seders to being full parts of our community at other points. So yeah, to think both in one's community, but also actually in one's friends, extended family, who's not getting invitations. Now, let's be honest, we're, talking in such a lovely, warm, open way. Sometimes people don't get invited because they're difficult. They don't have social skills. They might smell. They might, all sorts of different things. And there are ways, first of all, we noted that people are so grateful that they really put their best face forward and are really responsive to cues when perhaps things aren't necessarily socially appropriate. But those are also some of the people that we want to keep in mind, because our community is lacking if there are people who are alone for both Seders and for other moments.
That is both beautiful and meaningful, and thank you for holding that space for those people too. Or teachings that have shaped your understanding of what it means to practice this hospitality that you have, especially at the Seder. I know that the base has its own Haggadah shel Pesach. Can you say a bit about that, Rabbi Hart?
Sure. So going back to 2014, the first year we did a Seder, before there was even a base, but this is the sort of the origin story of the base. It was actually the night before the Seder. I remember this. I was sitting there with myself, my wife, and our co-conspirator. And as we were thinking about the random group of 12 people who are coming to our Seder the next night, some of them were unaffiliated friends of ours. There was a Christian minister coming. There was an interfaith couple. There was this Haredi guy who was at a local hospital. And we're like, I don't think this Maxwell Haggadah in front of us is going to work. It's just like, it's just not. And we're like, you know what? I bet you we could take this Haggadah and sort of like reimagine a little bit. So, I mean, it was not the smartest thing to do, but the night before the Seder, we took the Haggadah, put it onto a Google Doc, and we started thinking about poems and articles and writings and thoughts and questions and quotes that could supplement the Haggadah. And we also, also made sure to have all the halachic aspects, all the sort of ritual aspects, all the core pieces. But we also tried to bring other things in, even just so people can, get lost in the Seder and start reading a poem or reading an article. And we put it together in a couple of hours. It wasn't our best work, but it was really powerful. We printed it out at Staples the next day, and I think we had 14 people come to that Seder, some of whom had never been to Seder before, and people stayed until like 1 in the morning. And we're like, wow, that was cool. This I got it, like we're onto something. So both it launched the community, and then the next year when we were doing Seders again, we're like, let's take that Haggadah, but now not just the night before, maybe a few weeks before. Let's actually, I mean, because it was a Google Doc, we're like, let's edit it, let's iterate on it, that didn't work last year, or we forgot to put in Manish Jana. Okay, fine, that's an important piece. Or we probably something like that, and we had version 2.0. And we did it again the next year, version 3.0. And so now this is our 10th year of running Seder, and each year we've learned a little bit better. And we've actually learned that there's a lot of wisdom in the way the rabbis constructed the Haggadah. Obviously, we weren't the first people who thought of this. So we use a lot of that wisdom. We bring in some Bob Marley and some Rabbi Jonathan Sacks and some New York Times pieces and sort of like a whole range of pieces. And we print it out and put in a nice cover. And I think we put on the cover, said made with love by the base community. And I think every year for the last 10 years, someone at the end of the Seder says, can I bring this home with me? And I'm like, of course, like this event to be bring home. But people are really touched by it. And I think it speaks to what our Seders try to be, something that someone wants to bring home with them afterwards. It's not just an experience you go to and you leave it there. You say, very nice, I'll see you next year. I'm going to go back to my regular life, lonely or sort of whatever it is. But actually, someone takes a piece of that home with them. And that's a really powerful statement.
And I'll just add, Hart, I mean, this is who you are as a leader, and therefore is the spirit of the community, but it has the fingerprints and the impression of everybody who's a part of the team. And each Seder is different because whoever shows up has an equal part in shaping the night and the discussion. And so maybe we use the same Haggadah each year, but it's almost feels like a new Haggadah and a new experience each year because everybody's voice and everybody's different personalities come forth.
But if I understood well, you do update a little bit Haggadah every year, right?
Correct. We do update it every year, mostly based on feedback. Actually, one of the things we do, and this is actually a pro tip for anyone who's doing this in a serious manner, it's not for everyone, but right after the Seder, we have a meeting, and all the host team gathers together, and I label the document where we take notes. So like this year it was 2025, so I'll label the document notes for Seder 2026. And we'll put all of our feedback. What was great? The chicken was too burnt. The vegetables weren't enough. The people, we should think about rearranging it. Make sure Marco is in the center of the table. Whatever it is, more songs, less songs, only songs. And the Haggadah, we forgot to put in Rabban Gamliel, and we need Rabban Gamliel in our Seder. Or Rabbi Sachs was missing. I don't know. Or this poem turned someone off. So we'll save all that as notes for Seder 2026. And then the next year, when we're starting to plan, around Purim time, maybe a month or two before, or a few weeks before, we're like, okay, let's get started. And I'll search in my Google Drive, and I'm like, wow, we have notes for 2026. And all right, so that's how. Right, this is like a pro tip for people who are doing events and doing things on a regular basis. And luckily, Seders happen on a regular basis. But actually, we learn to iterate and to build off of our success and our growth opportunities every year.
Mhm. For someone who had the privilege of participating and hosting in a way Seder Pesach with both of you for the last 2 years, I may say that my favorite part of that Agada is the beautiful article from New York Times published 2015, if I'm not wrong. That is titled "The Stories That Bind Us," right? Can you tell us
That's
briefly
right.
about that?
Yeah, sure. It's a story. It was published, I think, in like March or April, so right around Pesach time. I don't think intentionally, but God has, God has greater plans. And it was an article about basically these researchers told how they measured resiliency in children. And they found that the greatest indicator for children's success in life and resilience was how well they knew their family stories, how well they knew where their ancestors came from, stories of triumph, of trials, of sort of immigration, being homeless, success, growth, and knowing where your family came from actually helps you be resilient in life. And so we use that as sort of like a sort of entree into saying that's kind of what the Seder is. We're sort of like going through our family's stories, and we actually have people share about their own personal family stories, their ancestors, their grandparents, great grandparents, sort of how they came as immigrants or if they came as immigrants. We say that's what the story of Passover. So that New York Times article helps lend sort of like an entry point into that whole narrative of the Seder.
Well, Tanya, do you have a favorite part of Haggadah?
So this year it was Hallel. I think the fact that, as I mentioned before, people, regardless of their literacy, were able to just tap in. And it wasn't just my experience. People said to me afterwards, wow, something transportive and transcendent happened. But one thing
The
that I
people said
think,
it changed their lives. Yeah.
no, like two people, yes. Yeah, it was really profound. I will also say that my family from California, I'm from Arizona, by the way, originally. I don't know if you know that, but my family from the Bay Area and from Oregon come in for the Seders. And not just because they love me, but because my sister and nephew and niece, they find this Seder to be more meaningful. Well, I don't know who's listening to this recording. I'm sure wherever they go is meaningful, but um, they really appreciate the Seders. What I love is there are many pathways in to the Passover story, to the Exodus story, and the rabbis put many different modalities, and one of them is super textual, right? Like we all know that part. I was sitting next to some young people where they turn to each other, "Oh, Magid, your favorite part," you know? So, and that's kind of where maybe the people have a harder time tapping in. And I really love the creativity of the skit. There's this rabbinic obligation to recite certain verses from the book of Devarim and to connect them to the story and to verses from the book of Exodus and elsewhere. And we fulfill our obligation. We're very halachic. We follow the ritual, but it's done as a skit. And as we know, we also respect people who are more reserved. Obviously, not everybody is going to put themselves forward, but it's always fun when maybe who's someone who's more quiet and hasn't participated in more of the spontaneous discussions, even though we also have small group discussions for the teachers in here, kind of a little bit like think, pair, share kind of dynamics happening. But for the skit, it's really lively and people love it. And this year, ChatGPT, we admit, was author to parts of it. And yeah, so I really love that.
Wow. And if I remember in this kid, there are many different characters: the Pharaoh, the Pharaoh's advisors, Moshe, God.
God, yeah.
Tell me, how many people did you have this year and last year?
So between the two nights, we do it as Tanya mentioned, we do it in different people's homes, so it's not everyone split together. But between the three apartments the first night and two apartments the second night, we had around 105 people came to our seders,
Mhm.
which is pretty amazing. Last year I mean, I think every year we've had, not every year, but the last couple of years we've had similar numbers, other than that first year of COVID, second year of COVID. But since then, I mean, the first year we started with 14, and then it was, I think, 30, and then 60, and then somehow, and the crazy thing is we don't know most of these 100 people. Most of them are not even signed up a week before the Seder. Uh, but somehow every year people find us. People show up the day of. People show up unannounced. And some people come back again every year, and some people have come back again and become part of the community. Um, but it's a lot. It starts, and going back to something you asked before, Marco. What someone else could do. You don't need to have 100 people in your home. You don't need to have 100 people at your Seder. One person is the whole world, and that that's like that's part of, like, sort of like foundational to what we do. Um, Even someone asked me, like, why are you trying to get 100 people? I'm like, we're not. We're trying to get one person who needs a Seder, and another person who needs a Seder, and another one person who needs a Seder.
Mhm.
It happens to be there are 100 people like that. I mean, there are probably thousands of people like that, and there are people like that in Arizona and in New York and everywhere in between, in Jerusalem, in probably every city, and probably the bigger the city, the more people there are who are probably looking for something a little bit more meaningful and spiritual and welcoming and intimate. So that's how we started, like on a street corner, trying to get one person to come to a Seder. And I mean, through that, over the years, we've had, I guess, 10 years, 100, I don't know, probably maybe close to 1,000 people by now at Seders. But uh, it's pretty amazing.
Wow. Um, at this point, I just want to acknowledge the presence of several hosts of the base, Taylor with Neighbors. So a big shout out to them. Thank you so much for being with us and for being for others during Pesach. Um, a question I was thinking about is what would a more hospitable Jewish future look like to you? And what small roles can each of us play in our own communities to help make this vision of the base real, this next Pesach and beyond?
Great. So first of all, it's not too late. And actually, yesterday was the second Passover, or 2 days ago, the second Passover, Pesach Sheni, which is the holiday of second chances. So we have that spirit of second Passover, and actually to remind us that actually we can find ways to do this whenever we want, and next year and this year. One thing I'll say is, this is a little bit ironic as a rabbi speaking, but don't rely on rabbis, and don't wait for the institutions and the synagogues and the JCCs to sort of organize a program and figure out and bring in a consultant for the JCC and the federation. That's all amazing. We've benefited. I've benefited from all of that. But what actually started our community and our Seders was a bunch of people, just regular, boring people who had an idea and did something. And I remember before I started the Seder, I spoke to some of the rabbis in the different shuls. We should do something, and I don't. All amazing people and all well-intentioned, but somehow nothing ever happened. And then we just started doing it. So I think that's a good lesson. I know there are some rabbis on this call. Nothing against rabbis. I love rabbis. Some of my best friends are rabbis. But actually, it's important for non-rabbis to also think about what's my role in organizing, doing one person, one thing, one second chance.
Beautiful. And it speaks so truly to what Urle Tzedek stands for also. So
Yeah, I want to.
Yes,
No, I want to
please.
just speak to just to go off of that. Just you were talking about one of the things that Urle Tzedek does, the showers for people in Arizona, which is such a beautiful and powerful sort of act of loving kindness. I was thinking about that actually. We had an experience in our Seder, and it sticks with me all the time. And sometimes I think about doing more, but we were hosting Seder. This is maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. We hosted a Seder first night. We were so proud of ourselves. We did so great. All these people, great, fine. And then getting ready for the second Seder, somehow we found this guy walking around the neighborhood. I'm not even sure how we met him and if he spoke to us, if we spoke to him. But it turns out this guy who's in the neighborhood was Jewish, and somehow fell on hard times and was living in his car and was homeless. And I forgot how exactly it happened, but we ended up offering him to come for Seder. Because that's what we did. We were doing Seders. Come for Seder, it's amazing. And he's like, I can't come. We're like, why not? And he said, because I haven't showered in weeks, and I don't want to come to your home, not having showered. And so I made a split second decision. I said, why don't you come to our home and shower? And he said, really? And I said, yeah, come to our home and shower. It's fine. So I brought him home. My wife was sleeping, and I went into the room and I said, don't freak out, but there's a homeless man in our bathroom. But it was great. And he showered for the first time. I don't know how long. It was bad enough that the towel he used got ruined afterwards. And it was fine. It's not a fancy towel, but it was and he came for Seder, and it was one of the most powerful Seders we had. And I remember someone in the middle started yelling about why are we even telling stories about bondage and poverty to freedom? And this homeless guy gets up and he says, no, it's so important to tell that story. He said, because that's my story. And it was a really powerful moment. And I sort of like feel bad that that's my one experience of having a homeless person shower in my home. And earlier Tzedek, you guys do this every day, or I don't know what it is, every week, or sort of all the time. So that's a really beautiful service.
It's so beautiful, and it reminds me of the story of Abraham welcoming three strangers that he saw, and he saw them standing, and he rushed, he ran to meet them, to greet them, bowing to the ground, and he invited them to his tent, and he washed their feet, bathed their feet, and give them some food. So it definitely speaks to this radical hospitality, and this idea how many of us, many people we wait for some kind of perfect moment to intervene, to help, to do something, when we can see in Abraham's story, in this story that you just shared about showers, how there's something about spontaneity and the presence that suddenly arrives to you, and the opportunity to make a good deed, a mitzvah.
I will just say I'd never heard that story, and I've been working closely with Hart for, I mean, I started in 2021 before I graduated, and I think that that also powerfully, we say machshava, that the intention shapes the outcome, and you could just see Hart. This might be hard for you to listen, but it's not about the ego. It's not about coming on this Zoom call and telling you how great the base Seders is. It really is for real, and I think it's the authenticity and the realness that people feel. Um, as Hart said, when it's not about how many people come; it's about touching the people who come. And so, in addition, as Hart said, to just going out there and doing it, I think it's also inner work, not to not do it until we're perfectly, intentional and authentic, but I think the spiritual power of love and doing things really just to serve can make actual miracles happen. We tell the Exodus story, but we kind of joke to ourselves that to getting over the finish line in terms of just the logistics of it, we really feel the hand of God, really like this, uh, helping us and with us. And so I think that also is an important step for the preparation.
As we bring this beautiful conversation to a close, I want to leave us with a line from the Talmud, Tractate Shabbat, one that's simple, bold, and for me, really transformative, and that speaks to what we are discussing tonight. It says in Talmud, welcoming guests is greater than receiving the divine presence, the Shekhinah. It's so powerful. This radical idea that opening our homes, our tables, our hearts is not just a mitzvah, not just kindness, but something holier than even the most elevated spiritual experience one can have. So tonight we've heard how hospitality builds community, affirms dignity, creates spaces of belonging. And it reminds us that Judaism isn't only practiced in shuls and Beit HaMidrash, study halls. It's also lived out in dining rooms, in doorways, dinner tables, street of Washington Heights. So as we head into our next Seder next year, or any other gathering, Shavuot is very, very, very near. May we remember that every act of welcome is a sacred act. May we all be hosts and guests who help bring more of the divine into the world. So thank you both so much, Rabbi Hart, Rabbi Tanya, for your stories, your wisdom, your hearts. And thank you to everyone who joined us tonight, hosts of the Seder with Pesach, Seder with Neighbors, and everyone else. I see some guests from Miami Beach, South Beach, Miami. Thank you so much for joining us. It's such a pleasure to see you. And if you're moved by tonight's conversation, I want to invite you to support the work of Urlet Tzedek. It's your way of helping ensure that the values we talked about tonight aren't just talked about, but lived. You can donate through our website on Urlet Tzedek and sign up for our newsletter to make sure you don't miss any other future panels, programs, and justice-driven Torah conversations. If you happen to be passing through Washington Heights in New York City at any moment of your life, please reach out to us on basecommunity.org. We would be more than happy to welcome you. So Laila Tov, and thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, Marco.
Thank you, Marco.